Hello, my name is Jody Gordon-Lucas of QueenieKnits.com, and I'm going to demonstrate today the Phalangee Technique. The Phalangee Technique is something I created. It was published in Knitty.com in the Deep Fall 2012 issue. And this is a way to easily create finger openings in your fingerless mitts without having to break your yarn and cast on stitches and reconnect. I'll be demonstrating today on a new design that I'll be releasing for free. The pattern is called Majority Mitts, and the reason they're called that is they are a present for my son's 21st birthday. So let's get started. We're going to begin with the thumb. So this is a majority mitt. It's a 1x3 rib. They're the phalange finger openings, and I made the largest size. So the technique begins with the thumb. And you're going to work to the thumb gusset marker, the first marker, and work a lifted left increase. So you pull this stitch up below the live stitch, put it on the needle and work it. And that's a lifted left increase. Then you're going to slip the marker and you're going to work an increase on the other side of the marker. You're going to make a lifted right increase. So you lift the stitch below the live stitch up onto the needle. You kind of slightly off to the right. You could also just move it to the right and work it. And then you knit into it. Working ahead a bit, you're going to then work the rest of the thumb gusset in the established pattern until you get to the second thumb gusset marker. Again, work a lifted left, lift it up under the needle and knit it, slip the marker, lift the stitch below the live stitch onto the needle, work a lifted right increase. And Capboardy has some excellent videos that demonstrate this in more detail. So now you have 4 new stitches, 1 on each side of the thumb gusset markers. You work it out round even, and then you need to connect them. And you knit corresponding stitches together. So here you've got a marker with one of the new stitches on the right. You insert the needle into the stitch, and then you're going to look to the opposite side, and you're going to find the corresponding stitch on the right side as it's facing of the marker on the other side of the gusset. Insert the needle into the front stitch, and then you're going to, it's a little fiddly, but you're going to find the back of the stitch that crossed the gusset, and then pull a loop through both of those stitches. So now the corresponding stitches are connected. Slip the marker, and then you always will slip the stitch after the marker. So the stitch before the marker is connected to the corresponding stitch. The stitch after the marker is always slipped. Skipping ahead a bit, I've worked across the gusset in the established pattern. I am now at the stitch marker on the opposite side of the gusset. And again, that's the stitch that you want to connect to the corresponding stitch. Now this is the stitch that was slipped on the opposite side. So you insert the needle into the front. You catch the back of the stitch that was slipped on the opposite side of the gusset, and you pull a loop through both of those stitches. The corresponding stitches are now knit together. Then you slip the marker, and again you slip the stitch after the marker. Now that stitch is the one that's connected to the one on the opposite side. The neat thing about the Phalangee technique is that you're able to completely finish the thumb before you continue to the remainder of the hand. So I've worked all the way around and back to the first thumb gusset marker, and I'm going to remove that marker. And now those circular needles are going to just be used to hold the remaining stitches in the hand round. And you're going to switch to double points and finish the thumb separately. So you just work all of the thumb gusset stitches around to the second marker, putting them onto, I usually put them onto 3 double points. And here's what that looks like to have the thumb gusset stitches on the 3 double points being worked independently of the remainder of the hand. Okay, so the majority mitt pattern is going to have the specifics of the finishing of the thumb, and you'll need to read that for the decreasing. But I finished it up, bound it off with Jenny surprisingly stretchy bind off, and as you can see, you can actually wear put the mitt on with the thumb completely finished. Now that your thumb is done, you need to go back and finish the round on the hand. And remember, you left that round to go do your thumb and work it on the double points. So give yourself a tail of about 8 inches. You'll need that when you're finishing up, and complete that round. If you recall, when we started the Phalangee technique on the thumb, we created 4 new stitches, but we've only dealt with 2 of those stitches as we've completed the thumb itself. Now we need to decrease the the two remaining stitches. That's a knit two together on one side of the thumb. We're going to make an increase in the center to reestablish the 1x3 pattern, and then work a slip knit on the other side of the thumb to get rid of the last of the new stitches. And it looks a little wonky as you begin, but in a few rows it's going to work out. And you'll take that yarn tail that you have left yourself and use that to sew up the little gap that you have at the base of the thumb. Now it's time to use the Phalangee technique to make finger openings. Okay, to establish your setup round, work the first eighth of your stitches. Divide your stitches to 8 equal groups. Work a lifted left increase, place a marker, this is marker A, and then work a lifted right increase. And then you'll work the next 1/8 of your stitches. In this case, it's this largest size, which is 7 stitches. So you do that, you're going to do it a total of 6 times. And that'll make 4 groupings on the front of the mitt and 4 groupings on the back of the mitt. And again, each new marker is going to have 2 new stitches associated with it, 1 on each side. This is how the mitt will look after the setup round is complete. There are 6 markers, A, B, C on the front, and then C, B, A on the back. You want to reverse the order because A connects to A, B to B, C to C, and so forth. The connecting rounds are worked the same as what you did for the thumb. The right stitch by A1 is connected to the right as you're looking at it stitch beside A2. Slip A1 and then slip the next stitch. Work even an established pattern to the next marker and repeat the same process. Connect the first stitch to the corresponding stitch on the other side. Slip the marker, slip the next stitch. And then you continue like this the whole way around, and that's going to give you the connections between your fingers. Now it's time for that unusual bind off. And I usually use a double point to work the stitches off of the circular needle. This is because I'm switching back and forth between stitches on the front needle and the back needle, and it's just easier to keep both needles just at the with stitches ready to be worked. All right, I use Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off because I find that extra little wrap really does make a difference, and you want to have nice stretchy finger openings. And you can see me working it here. There are better places to see detailed demonstrations of how to work it. All right, so the first step is to bind off from the beginning of the round to A1, and this is where I am now. And okay, so I've bound off this last stitch. All right, now what I'll do is I'll put the live stitch back onto the needle to hold it, and kind of shift needles a little bit. The bind off is going to resume on the opposite side at A2, but I need to be able to get to the stitches at A2. So I'll slide all the stitches on the hind needle to the edge, and then I'll use a separate double point and slip them onto that, using it almost as a stitch holder until I get to the marker A2, and that's on the back side of the hand. All right, and remember that double point in the back now is being used as a stitch holder. I pick up the double point that I'm using to actually work the stitches, get the last worked stitch back on the needle, and get rid of that front marker. And then I'll bump back to the back and bind off the stitches between A2 in the back and B2 in the back. All right, so I just finished binding off the back of the hand between A2 and B2. All right, so now it's time to cross to the front again, but I need to cross over to the stitches at B1. Well, I can't get to the stitches at B1 until I transfer the ones in the way to a double point to hold them. So the next step is to bind off in the front of the hand between marker B1 and C1, again remaining in pattern. Okay, here we go. The bind off has arrived at C1. It needs to jump across to the back again to C2. And once again, there are stitches in the way. So you slip them to the edge of the needle, transfer them to a double point to hold them, and then you will resume binding off at C2. Okay, so those stitches are on the double point, and it's time to switch to the back needle again. And this is one of my favorite parts of the bind off, because I can finally, in the course of binding off starting at C2, get rid of the circular needle, because this portion of the bind off is going to wrap around the side of the hand. So you're actually going to be binding off from C2 in the back around the edge of the hand to C1. So here's a good shot of it at the midway point. You've got half of the bind off done. So next you're going to shift the circular needle around a bit so that you can finish that stretch all the way to C1. Okay, and here we are back at C1. We've just gotten rid of the circular needle, and we cross over the bind off that we've already worked back to C2, and now we're going to be getting those stitches taken care of on that first double point. Let's see, at this point we're binding off from C2 to B2. And then when we get to B2, we'll cross to the front to B1, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here's a shot of the completed bind off. You can see how the second half crossed over the first half. And really you just follow one double point to the next until you get to the final stitch. And there we go. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, you can find me on Ravelry.com. There's a Queenie Knits fan group. Drop in and say hi. Happy knitting!